And since I'm sure you're aching to know, it actually stands for Naval Modular Automated Communications. But yes,
Gonzo, the Coast Guard Years, Boston, Episode 4, Radar School and the Cat Club.
it wasn't long after arriving in Boston that I'd be heading off to my first specialized electronics school. My initial set of orders said I was going to Radar School, COMDAC or Command Display and Control, and NAVMAC School. NAVMAX is a fancy acronym for Satellite Communications. And since I'm sure you're aching to know, it actually stands for Naval Modular Automated Communications. But yes, NAVMAX is way easier to say, but it kind of makes me hungry for like a McDonald's Big Mac. But I'd prefer a double quarter pounder with cheese, which also makes me wonder why they didn't just call it a half pounder with cheese. Yes, this is the stuff that goes through my head. Yet, I digress again. Radar School would be about a month or so, and I would be learning about the ANSPS 64 X-band and S-band radar systems. Oh, and I didn't mention it because I didn't, which is why I'm bringing it up now. Radar has its own acronym, Radio Detection and Ranging. And best of all, I was going back to good old Governor's Island. That's right, I'm headed back to New York City, a place I knew and was comfortable with. By comfortable, I meant I knew how to get there, and I mostly knew what to expect, and I wasn't horribly worried that I was going to be murdered in a cab on the way to the base. Which isn't to say that I wouldn't be murdered. I just knew that now the likelihood was fairly low. I admit I wasn't exactly excited to be going to Governor's Island. I was just starting to find my groove in Boston, and I was happy that I was actually fitting in with these hooligans I was calling friends. Also, the sooner I finished my additional schools, the sooner I'd be heading to a big white one, and I wasn't excited about that at all. I really didn't want to end up on a ship again, but that is exactly where I was headed, regardless of how much I wish for otherwise. I don't even remember how I got to Logan Airport. It was probably Keith who dropped me off. At some point, he had also gone home to Ohio and had gotten a Chevy Z24. Man, we had so much fun on that car, but more on that later. Just like when I first arrived in New York City, I landed in LaGuardia, and I am telling you, I never got used to flying over the water, and then at the last second, the plane touched down before pancaking into the river. It was always a shock to my nerves. Although all of New York City was a shock to my nerves. But unlike before, I took less stuff this time and was mostly prepared for the fast-paced and intense atmosphere of New York City. I got a cab, and this time, it didn't take me anywhere that I didn't expect it to take me. Also, I hadn't realized just how long the cab ride was from the airport to Governor's Island. I suppose it had something to do with the fact that I was scared shitless the last go-around. I was totally filled with confidence this time. The cab driver dropped me off right in front of the ferry entrance to Governor's Island because I knew what to tell him. I strolled to the Coast Guard ferry terminal waiting area and took a seat like I had done 100 times before. All right, well, so that might be a mild exaggeration, but I had made that crossing a lot. The ferry ride was uneventful. I knew more or less where I was going. I was headed to the barracks building and would be informed where I'd be staying. The night before, I lumbered to the barracks, passing familiar landmarks. Seriously, this was going to be easy compared to the last time I was in New York City. Arriving in the barracks, spoke to the person at the desk, and was given directions to a different part of the building that I hadn't been to before. It was more or less easy to find, as it was everything is interconnected within the barracks, so it wasn't too far from where I stayed previously. My room, to my surprise, only had one twin-sized bed. Holy crap, I had my own room. Well, of course I did. I was a newly minted petty officer, and I wasn't a wannabe electronics technician, I had at least risen in status on Governor's Island. It was late afternoon, and honestly, I was hungry and tired. I thought it might be a good idea to get cleaned up, change my clothes, and find some food. I dropped my bags off on my bunk, began to take my stuff out to get cleaned up. Believe it or not, I also brought the same going outfit that Crosby, Rafa, and I had worn when I was previously there. I didn't expect that I would be going out anywhere, actually, but I wanted to be prepared just in case, because being prepared is part of the Coast Guard motto, which was Semper Paratus, always prepared. To this day, that sounds so lame, Semper Paratus. Anyway, okay. I was hoping actually to meet up with Crosby, assuming he was still there, although I didn't even bother to check before leaving Boston, which was kind of stupid of me if he was still there or not. I was rummaging through my stuff. I started to panic a bit. I had been looking for something in my bags that I was sure I would not have forgotten. I had taken everything out of my bags, turned them upside down, like what I was worried I had forgotten would magically fall out of my bags. Damn it. Shit. Fuck. Of all the things I could have forgotten, it seems trivial, but it was actually a big damn deal. I had forgotten to bring a fucking towel. I could brush my teeth, but nothing to dry my face as one does, much less taking a shower and drying off. How the hell could I have forgotten a towel? This goes to show that I still most definitely needed parental supervision. I'm a knucklehead, that's how. The only thing to do now was to head across the river and find a store and buy a towel. I changed into my regular civilian clothes and headed right back to the ferry terminal and went back to the city. Once I got off the ferry, I strolled around the streets and started roaming the financial district looking for something similar to a Kmart. For those of you who are unfamiliar, a Kmart is kind of like a Walmart, Target, but if like Walmart and Target had like a grandmother or something like that. It was kind of an everything store. You don't see Kmarts around anymore, I don't think. But here's the funny thing about South Manhattan on a late Sunday afternoon. Everything is fucking closed. Like everything. I also think I was the only person walking around that time of day. I mean, it was basically a ghost town. I walked around for like 30 minutes and still nothing. It occurred to me that I hadn't walked around that part of New York City during the daytime, like ever. It was always at night. And I was never really paying attention because someone else more familiar, like Crosby, was almost always leading the way. All right, I said screw it, and back to the Coast Guard ferry, back across the river, back to the barracks. I figured I'd sort it out one way or the other. Oh, and that I mentioned it was also around late May or early July, which meant it was hot. So not only did I not find a towel, but I made the situation worse by sweating. Crap! By the time I got back to the barracks, I decided the only thing to do was to take a shower and hope no one was in the bathroom and dry off with a t-shirt or 3. Yeah, that's what I did. I took a super fast shower, and of course, some jackass showed up and saw me drying off with the t-shirt. I acted like it was no big deal, and he acted like it wasn't totally weird. So I finished cleaning up, left to head back to my room, and pretend that I wasn't a total fucking moron. It was sometime later that evening that I was out and about, maybe looking for food or to go to the bathroom. Whatever it was, it got me out of my room, which, the more I thought about it, the room looked like, it looked like a prison cell, except it didn't have like the toilet in the corner and there weren't bars, for doors. It had the walls were covered with, well, basically they were all cinder block walls and they were painted with this off-whitish, yellowish semi-gloss paint or something like that. Or I think it was semi-gloss. Yeah, could have been glossy. Who knows? So I don't remember exactly where and when I ran into him, but I was absolutely ecstatic that I did.
walking through the halls the same time I was out and about, somewhere in the barracks, I think it was in the barracks, was none other than Ron. Ron from the place that old hippies go to die. That being Missoula, Montana, for those of you who don't remember. From what Ron tells me, that's what happens in Missoula. Old hippies go to die. Ron was this tall, lean guy. He wore glasses with short brown hair, and he always spoke super mellow. Like he was the love child of a surfer hippie mashup sort of thing. I think we were both happy to see someone that we actually knew, although Ron always seemed that he was more relaxed about everything and could make friends with just about anyone. He was just that kind of guy. In some ways, he reminded me of Keith back in Boston, except Ron was super low-key. Keith was low-key, but he got really loud, which is a good thing. It's not a bad thing at all. I love Keith. He's a great guy. Ron and I shook hands or something like that, and we caught up in about what we had all been up to and things of that nature over the last month or so. Ron had been stationed or was stationed in San Juan, Puerto Rico. Like how I roll those R's. Anyway, I think he was at some type of support center similar to what I was doing, and he was supposed to be working on electronics gear on the small boats and the Coast Guard 110s that were out of San Juan. I say supposed to be because of all the things that anyone could be doing, Ron was playing racquetball. That's right, racquetball. If I recall the conversation correctly, that's pretty much all he had been doing since he got to San Juan. Ron apparently was some kind of amazing racquetball player, and I think he pretty much just played racquetball and representing the Coast Guard in tournaments. Like, I think he pretty much just played racquetball and that's it. That's it. I mean, how the hell does that stuff happen anyway? Shit like that never happened to me, but then again, I had never played racquetball. Take that back. I played once or twice during a summer trip we were in Missouri, and this is when I was still in high school. It's a whole different thing, and it's, flashbacks, bad memories, blah. Anyway, stuff like that never happens to me, but then again, I'm the idiot that forgets to pack a damn towel. So what more do I expect? Speaking of which, I was telling Ron what a fucking knucklehead I was, and lo and behold, Ron offered me one of his towels. Plural. Like he brought more than one. Ron had saved the day for me. And honestly, I couldn't have been happier. Although I did wonder why he brought two towels with him. Or maybe the real question is, why the hell did I forget in the first place? Ron and I would hang out later while we were both at Governor's Island. But before all that, I also ran into someone I knew from ET school. Good old Jerry. Jerry had a Polynesian-sounding last name, but it wasn't actually Polynesian at all. That dude was as white and as pale as they get. And like before, Jerry was funny as shit. Jerry and I didn't hang out all that much while we were in ET school, but when we did, it was super fun. Jerry was usually up for just about anything. Let me digress for a minute or three. Back when we were in ET school, the band REM was coming to New York City to play at Madison Square Garden. I'm a huge REM fan, and I really wanted to go. Now, this was back before you bought tickets online. You either had to call or you had to stand in line for tickets, which is what Jerry and I did. We had gotten up super early, like on a Saturday or Sunday, and we went to Madison Square Garden to get tickets. The line was already like a zillion miles long when we got there. And they were handing out wristbands, which meant it was a lottery for tickets. Now, you didn't have to worry about getting tickets. It meant that it wasn't first come, first serve. You had to purchase tickets in the area that was denoted by your wristband. This was done supposedly to keep scalpers from buying all the best seats and resell them at outrageous prices. By the time we had gotten to the ticket booth and had bought tickets, we had nosebleed seats that were on the completely opposite end of the garden. From the map, I could tell we were way far away. I just didn't know how far until the night of the show, which is like a month or so later. So when REM eventually came to New York City and Jerry and I went, and it was then that Jerry told me he hadn't listened to REM before and didn't know any of their music. But he said he wasn't going to turn down a chance to go to a concert, so he was happy to go with me. We had a blast, although we could barely see the stage from where we were. But as always, it's the experience that really matters. Okay, so back to New York City and radar school time. As I said, I ran into Jerry, who I think was there earlier going to Loran C School, but I could be wrong about that. But he wasn't going to be in New York City for much longer, at least not that I can remember. Regardless, Jerry and I did what we would have done way back when in ET school. We hopped on the red number 1 train from South Ferry and rode into the village. Exactly where we got out, I don't know. We had hit a few bars at this point and somehow ended up walking down the middle of this mostly dark street. Actually, Jerry was walking in the middle of the street. I was on the sidewalk. Well, there wasn't a lot of traffic in this part of the village, although there were cars parked along the streets. Jerry was really toasted at this point. Hence, he was walking in the middle of the street. He was yapping away about something and then sort of just stopped. I remember him looking at me and saying, "Do you hear music?" "I hear music." He then got down onto his stomach and laid his ear against the street. "Yep, I hear music." I didn't hear shit and thought Jerry was just being, well, drunk Jerry. He got up and went to the sidewalk where I was standing and started walking in the opposite direction from where we were originally headed. You know, it didn't matter to me which direction we were going because we sort of were just walking around aimlessly. Before you know it, Jerry found a cement staircase that went down into the sidewalk. And well, we went down the stairs and, as you can guess, I was following drunk Jerry down a flight of stairs. Pretty sure this is how horror movies start. At the bottom of the stairs to the right was a door, but it wasn't one of those typical doors. It was one of those doors that was, cut across horizontally across the middle, so the top and the bottom could be opened independently. In this particular instance, the top half was open, and a youngish-looking dude was hanging out there. He carded us, and I knew right then and there I was fucked. I still wasn't 21 yet, but I handed the dude my ID. He looked at it and gave it back to me, opened the door, and he let Jerry and I in. I remember giving him money. Well, I think I gave him money. I'm assuming it was the cover, but probably overpaid, I think, or maybe, yeah. Anyway, we walked in, and yep, there was music playing, loud music, actually. So yes, as you can imagine, there was a band playing to a small group of people. I somehow recall it was mostly a bunch of drunk fuckers. The bar was old, and the lighting was super dim. As a matter of fact, it had maybe only 3 lights in that whole place, and they were hanging from the ceiling. One of the lights was right there in front of the band. Jerry and I ordered a beer apiece, watched and listened to the band. By the way, the band's name was Gimme the Gun. Or was it Give Me the Gun? I think it was Gimme the Gun. We didn't stay very long. I think Jerry realized that he was past his alcohol limit, and we bugged out after a few beers. But it was cool. After that night, I don't think Jerry and I saw each other again, which is really too bad because he really is a great guy. And as I said before, he's funny as hell. Monday eventually came around, and Ron and I made our way to our first class together. We were both going to the same radar school, an SPS-64 radar system. That was going to be followed up by the S-band radar. The systems operated basically the same way. The biggest difference was the frequency output of both radars. X-band was between 8 and 12 gigahertz. I'm pretty sure the X-band we use, or the ones that I was familiar with, ran in the 9 gigahertz range. X-band was used as the Coast Guard's primary surface radar for navigation, as well as for detecting surface vessels, you know what I mean. Supposedly, they were able to detect things out to about 24 miles or so, but if I remember, the effective range was between really 12 and 16, while S-band operated in the 2 to 4 gigahertz range. And I think the one that we had operated around 3 gigahertz. The S-band, because of its much lower frequency, was used as the ship's long-range radar. And yeah, that thing was just, I don't know if it ever worked or not on the ships I was on. But, that was the story, and they're sticking to it. I think we had 3 different instructors, all of which I think I also liked. One instructor in particular I think I liked the most. I hadn't even thought about him until just now. He was the short, lean dude with really super short hair. The guy looked like he had just walked out of Coast Guard boot camp. I mean, that was that short. He was always super excited, like all the time. Which, if I'm being honest, it was a lot to deal with. But he kept things interesting, and honestly, he was just a good guy. As part of radar class, they gave us this workbook of sorts. The workbook had all kinds of different measurements that you would end up taking during part of the class. And it was also the workbook you would use to basically troubleshoot or align the radar. Radar systems are very finicky. Things have to be within a certain tolerance level, the voltages, amps, currents, frequencies, all that kind of cool stuff. So this book was something that, as I progressed in my Coast Guard career for the next 3 years that I had left, or actually at this point, slightly less than 3 years, I used it all the time when I needed to work on a radar. If there's something wrong with it, or it just needed a tune-up, an alignment, then that's the book I used. It was probably the single most valuable book I had received in any one of the Coast Guard training classes I'd been to. But I won't get too far ahead of myself about the ships I used to be on. Ooh, Lord. Within a few minutes of being in radar school, I was once again reminded just how clueless I was about everything related to electronics. None of the basic concepts and theories ever made any sense to me. I'm sure both the instructor and Ron realized that I was dumb as a stump. But I was going to have to rely on my ever so winning personality to make sure I got through both X-band and S-band school. Classes like before at ET school were a full day long. Lunch, I don't even even remember taking lunch when I was there. But I'm sure they gave us enough time to go to the mess hall and grab food, but I don't ever remember doing that, which is clearly just not that big of a deal. The entire first week of class was pretty much the same as the day before. I had so much electronic stuff shoved down my throat, stuff I didn't fully understand. My confidence and my ego were going to were taking a huge major hit right to the nuts. It was also during that week that Ron introduced me to a group of guys that were going through ET school. So basically, a couple classes behind us. The weird thing is, not the weird thing, Ron was stationed with one of the guys previously. I don't remember where or how or anything like that. But so that dude, he was shorter than Ron. And of course, he wore that stupid, goofy Coast Guard regulation mustache. But honestly, on him, it made him look like a cartoon character. The dude was loud and funny and definitely liked to drink and party. And by that, I mean, he liked to go out and have fun. And here's where things sort of turned around for me, at least in the fun department. I don't remember the guy's name, so let's call him Earl. Earl seems like a good name for the guy. Earl was always with these two other guys who we will call Earl 2 and Earl 3. On one particular night, the Earls invited Ron and I to go out with them to a nightclub. I'm pretty sure it was a Friday night. I'm not 100% sure about that, but I'm pretty sure. But yeah, let's go with Friday night. And of course, I was hesitant to go out most because I didn't know who they were. I didn't know them at all, but I knew Ron, so I figured it was a safe group. So why the hell not? I got all dressed up in my going out outfit, my black pants, my neon fucking green turtleneck, black blazer, and of course my elf-looking black boots. Hey, look, I thought I looked cool, albeit I was not. But hey, that's okay. It's what I wore. Correction. I never wore that thing outside of New York City. Like, I never wore it outside of New York City. But as was usual, we took the Coast Guard ferry across over to South Manhattan, took the subway up to somewhere in or near the village. I know we didn't get off in Christopher Street, but it was somewhere in the village-ish area. I don't remember exactly where. I do know we walked a few blocks from the subway to wherever this nightclub was. Now, mind you, I was so nervous when I got there that I'd be turned away